Begin the current Daf Mesechtes Bava Kama Daf Ches. Begin 8 lines down by the top of the Amud, where the Gemara is in the middle of a complex conversation, which the Gemara is in the middle of discussing this machlekes between Rabbi Shloimy and Rabbi Kiva regarding this halach of idis that you have to give. Rabbi Kiva holds you give from idis the mazik. Shmuel holds it only has to be idis the nizik. The Gemara had a question regarding bishaloi hein shaman, bishal oilam hein shaman. The Gemara had said, Bishaloi hein shaman. You evaluate based on his. And that the Gemara had asked a question from a brisa, seemingly indicating Bishal oilam hein shaman. The Gemara had answered, as we're going to shortly explain, why it's not difficult, because the reason why he's collecting from the baininess, even though it's his idis, is because he had idis, he sold it off, and now, therefore, the remaining bainis is still going to be qualified as bainis for the balchayv to collect from. Throughout the entire world. So we're discussing today's Daf Nizakin. We know regarding halachas of damages, shamalam be'idis, you evaluate when you're paying up, it has to be from your highest quality fields. A creditor is bebenis is medium grade. When the woman comes to collect her ksuba after she gets divorced, she collects only bezibur as the lowest grade. As we said, the Gemara had asked on the previous Daf, Bishaloi hein shaman, when you say that you can't be for the victim's best, but rather the mazik, is it per se his, or just means in velt? Meaning in the world market, that's considered as idis. The halacha of machal echad or the shloishim ne'adam ke'echad. We're going to discuss if someone sells his properties to one person or to three people as one, meaning on the same day. So they all take the place of the original owner, which is related to those who are coming to collect from him, the isha and the balchayiv and the victim, where they have to collect their quality of idis bein ziburas would be accordingly as it would be by the original person. But if it's bezach or zeh, let's say these three people did not buy on the same day, one bought on a Monday, one bought the following week, one bought the following month, then kul and gov min achron, then whoever's the first to collect will collect from the last available property, because that was the last one that was b'nei chayrin. Whoever bought that one, he's collected from first, no matter if it's idis bein ziburas, and no matter if you're a nizakin balchayv or exubisishim. If it's sold to one person, one after another, then kula nichnus tachzabayim, as we'll see why that is that way, that he takes the place of the owner regarding the collection. You don't say the last one to be bought is the first one to be collected from. The Gemara discusses, starting off the daf, two contradicting brises regarding bainis and ziburas. So a person owns only bainis and ziburas, but no idis. Does a bachayv collect from the bainis or from the ziburas? And the halacha the Gemara discusses regarding in the from the chasam shabbat, you don't collect from incumbent properties where there's collateral, when there's still available assets to be collected from the debtor. Even what he has is lowest grade, still you can't collect from, even though you're supposed to get idis abenis from the lekuches, those who bought from him. Now, what we had mentioned of in the previous stuff, which is the introduction to what we're going to discuss now, is, again, we had said Tishlumi Nezik has to be paid with idis fields. But this machlekes Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Shmuel said, but the nizik sheminan. Meitav Sadeh refers to the nizik's properties. His best is what you have to pay. Rabbi Kiva holds no, but the mazik sheminan, because Meitav Sadeh refers to the mazik's properties. So, because the question is, how do you translate Meitav Sadeh, Meitav Karmi, Yishalom? So on that, Rabbi Kiva says, you got to give your idis. You can't give. We're talking about when the idis, the nizik is equal to the mazik. That we said is the nafkamin in that case. Now the Gemara explained that the question we had was according to Rabbi Kiva, b'shaloi hein shaman or b'shaloi hein shaman. Is idis assessed only according to the mazik's properties or according to the majority of the properties of the world? So the Gemara said, well, it says meitav sedehu, meitav karmi yishalom. Obviously, it's referring to that when that was the Gemara's question. Is it just lemute de nizik? Is the word sedehu excludes only the nizik's properties but does not exclude the properties of the world? And maybe b'shaloi hein shaman, or maybe lemute de almanami. No, the word sedehu excludes all properties and b'shaloi hein shaman, which, as Rashi explains, meaning isli idis v'ziburas. If the person has the mazik has idis and ziburas, b'shavi ziburas the day idis to alma, his ziburas is equal to the idis of the world. That would be the relevant question about if you say b'shaloi hein shaman, so only his idis is acceptable for tashlum, but not his ziburas, because it's not the idis of the mazik's properties. On the other hand, if b'shaloi hein shaman, even his ziburas is acceptable because it is equal to the idis of the world. So on that, the Gemara explained and says we hold b'shaloi hein shaman, because it says sadehu. But the Gemara had asked from the following brisa. A brisa spoke about a person is obligated to pay up three people: a nizik, a bachlev, and his wife's ksuba. So he said, if he had Idis beinis ziburis. So okay, the zaken gets idis, beinis goes to the balchayv, and the ziburis goes to ksubas isha. Let's say only has idis, only beinis, only ziburis. So say everyone's going to collect whatever he has from. And let's say he has idis and ziburis or idis and beinis. So the zaken gets idis. Balchayv is going to get whichever case it is, either beinis or ziburis. And the ksubas isha is also going to get either beinis or ziburis, depending if he only has ziburis or only has beinis. Now, this is the part that we were up to that was difficult. There's a contradiction because there's two brises of hoyle beinis and ziburis. One brisa says nizaken balchayv get beinis and ksubas isha gets ziburis, and the other brisa says nizaken gets beinis but balchayv and ksubas isha gets ziburis. So what's the halacha of balchayv by this case of beinis ziburis? So the first approach the Gemara says, which we quoted on the previous daf, is that they both hold b'shalahin shaman, and that's what we're coming to resolve in the previous daf. It's not difficult, and you have to resolve, anyways, as a contradiction, as follows. And this is really where our Gemara is up to right now. We're 8 lines down at the top of the Amid, because the Gemara had answered, don't ask on the mandama b'shalahin shaman from the Bryce that seems to indicate that when you have beinis v'ziburis, the bachav is going to come from beinis. But wait a second, if he only has beinis ziburis and you hold b'shalohin shaman, that beinis is his idis. So why would the bachav be getting? If you hold b'shalohin shaman, that makes sense. It's the velt's beinis. So even though his best, the ruft beinis. So yeah, but if you hold b'shalohin shaman, that beinis is his idis. So why would the bachav be getting in the beinis? The Gemara answered, "K'gay choice like idis amachra." He had idis, the mazik. He sold it off, but before he sold it off, it's already a shibud to the creditor, and therefore that's his beinis, even though now it's his idis. That's what we answered. The Gemara says, it's logical like this, because there's a stira, and this is what we've been discussing. Like Tonach is another Bryce that seems to say not like this. Now, this Bryce says, if let's say it's beinis v'yibur, it's the same case. So this Bryce says, nizakin b'beinis. So the victim of damage gets collected from the beinis, because that's the best he has. Kashna Dodi. You quoted me a Bryce from the previous stuff on the top of this Amid that says the Bachayv gets the Beinis, and here you tell me the Bachayv gets Ziburas. Says no, you have to answer like this. Kan, the first Bryce that we already explained on the top of this Amid from the previous stuff, Shahoisla Idus Amachra. He had an Idus before, and when the loan happened, which is collateral, and then it's evaluated based on all the profits that he had. So that Beinis was already Meshubid. Khan, the second brisa, is shaloi hoisli. It is a machra. He didn't have idis and sell it off, and therefore that beinis, since everyone holds bishaloi hein shaman, is his idis. So Bachav doesn't collect from idis, so of course he doesn't collect from ziburas. That's approach number one. Again, we're going to go now into different ways of resolving these two the contradiction. We only brought in, but because the first brisa was a question on the manda amma b'shalahin shaman, and we answered it. We said, you know what, hachinam mistah, because there's a stira for another brisa, and how are you going to resolve it if not for the way I just explained it? But again, in Talmudic discourse, this is now we get into a conversation about the stira, which was brought into hachinam mistah, other ways how to resolve the stira in these two brises. Says if you want, you could say a second approach. So he says why you have to say this point, but no, you don't have to say. It's not talking about that he had a best field and then he sold it off. No, all he has is beinis. He never had an idis, and everyone holds, says Rashi, bishel oilam hein shaman. Meaning we're not going with what we just said before. We wanted to resolve it to the mandam bishel hein shaman. We have other ways of resolving the contradiction. Everyone agrees that you go based on market value. So then, v'loi kasha, why isn't that a difficulty? Seemingly should be a contradiction. We go based on shaloilam. Why is one saying the bachavi gets a beinis, one says ziburas? Because the second brayse that says the bachavi and the ksubis should get only ziburas is the shavya beinis shaloi ki idis de alma. His beinis is the equivalent of the world's idis. V'kan, the first brayse that says that the bachavi gets some beinis, is the loy shavi beinis shaloi ki idis alma. His beinis is not equal to the idis of the world; it's equal to the beinis of the world. Okay, so you collect from beinis. In other words, everyone holds b'shalom and shema, but when we're using the word beinis, we're referring to his beinis, and therefore, that's why they have this machlekes regard. Very simple. They're not disagreeing about it. They're just really talking about different cases. If his beinis is the beinis to alma, or it's idis to alma, and that would make the nafkamina regarding if he's going to collect from the beinis, or he's going to collect only from the ziburas. Or if you can say a third approach. Id both our brises are talking about current choice of bainis like bainis alma. No, his bainis was equivalent to bainis of the world, and they did not have originally any idis. So what are they disagreeing about? Marsa, by the time of the second brise, hold bishaloi hein shaman. Very good. You go based on him. Based on him. Wait a second. If he only has a bainis and ziburis, that bainis, quote unquote, is his idis. That's all he has. So obviously, the Baal is not going to collect from that. He's going to have to collect from the one lower, from the ziburis. Marsa, but the other Tana held no bishaloilam hein shaman. We go based on the world. Oh, okay. That's why the Baal is going to collect from bainis, like his halacha. Rashi has a different gear also, but he prefers this first interpretation. Now there's a fourth interpretation of Ravina Amar. He says that actually b'de'ula pligi. The machlekes of the two brises is in the halacha of ula, which is ula says, and this answers a question that was posed on the previous Daf's discussion. Dva Torah. Someone wants to know how you know this halacha. So it says biblical halacha b'chay b'zibuchas. Really, a creditor collects from the lowest grade. Where do you know this from? It says in the pasuk in the Varm. Says b'chutz tamid that on the outside he should stand. And the man that you're collecting from, that you're credited to, he's going to bring the security out to you. Now, what's the norm of a debtor if he owes money to the collector? What do you think he's bringing outside to the collector? The least of his vessels. Now, Taisa says, even though we know any type of vessel is considered meitav, as we said in the previous daf, what does that prove regarding karka? It's like a svara. Since like what you're going to take it as the most inferior, so when you're collecting karka, it's also going to be the most inferior, which is zibuchas. So why did they say that a creditor collects from beinis is kadesh leitinal dos b'fnei lavin? Is that meaning biblically it's really zibuchas? Where do we get this idea of b'chayv beinis? That's a takan chachamim, that we shouldn't close the door in front of borrowers because no one's going to want to lend money to borrowers. I'm going to get back to you for the zibuchas. Samar, the Tana who said, the first Tana who said that the Bachayv is going to collect from the beinis is like takanta the ula. He holds up ula's takana, which is that a Bachayv collects from beinis. Umar, the second Tana, less like takanta the ula. He doesn't hold of ula's takana. Rather, go based on the pasuk, and even if he would have idis, which now would be a bona fide beinis, both for his beinis and for the world's beinis. Even so, Rashi explains that this Tana would hold that no, the Bachleib only collects from zibuchas. Now, Taisis holds actually not. In Divrei Maschal Mar, he says no. This that we're saying that this Tana doesn't hold like Ula is only when there's no idis, which then his beinis is his idis. From the fact that we said beinis v'zibuchas, sounds like had he had idis beinis and zibuchas, then the Bachleib would collect from beinis. And because he holds that it's since he only has beinis v'zibuchas, the reason of the rationale the Gemara says again that Memtes Beis, that why is it about Chayv does not collect from Idis, really should collect from Idis because we don't want that, we want people to lend money, is that he shouldn't see his friend having a nice field and a nice apartment and you say, you know what, I'm going to go lend him money so that I can collect it when he doesn't pay up. We don't want people to do that. So Tay says an interesting svar. He says when this guy, even although he only has beinis v'zibuchas, since that beinis is his best, so it's still like the best that this guy has, the neighbor, and anything the neighbor has, even though it's lower than yours, I want to have what he has. So therefore, that's why this Tana doesn't hold up Takanta de Ula. Some machlekes Rashi and Taisis. Would that be even always? He doesn't hold up Ula Takanta. So he says no. It's only seemingly in the case of Beinas Ziburis. That is. What do you mean? I mean, it says Lahalochi. He says we pass in like Shaloi and Shaman. Yeah. Ravina that
whether he holds of the takuna that the crisis is whether they hold of the takuna. So obviously, according to Tosfos, they hold the shalom.
His baininess. Well, we're calling it baininess, which is really his idis, and we're saying that in that case where it's his best, so then we're not going to let you collect even though it's baininess. It's seemingly not dependent on shaloi or shaloi lamed shaman. Depends on how you're referring to it, but it's just about in bichlal. does a Balchayv collect from Bainis or does it only collect from Ziburis? Whether it's Bishaloilam or Bishaloi, I guess depends how you phrase it. But the main machlekes here is regarding Stam. Does a Balchayv collect from Bainis? Or does he collect from Ziburis? According to Rashi, it's Bachlal. It's across the board. Does he collect from the biblical halacha of Ziburis, or would we make it the Ganzach Bainis? According to Taisus, no, it's a little bit more refined, this interpretation. It's when you have Bainis and Ziburis. Then, Al Svara, not because Bishaloi so much, Al Svara, we're not going to let you then collect from Bainis because we're not going to want you to try to like poach, this best field that he has, even though it's only a Bainis, but it's still his best. So yeah, I guess open for interpretation, which opinion he goes like. Now the Gemara continues. So those are 4 different interpretations in how to resolve the contradiction in the case of when there's Bainis with Ziburis, if the Bachai is going to collect from Bainis, or is he going to collect only from Ziburis, which related to this discussion of Bishaloi and Shaman. How do we? Is the Bachai has to give his best? Or just not the nizik's best, but it could be even b'shal oilam and shaman. The way in general it's worth the best. Now the Gemara continues with following a brisa that relates back to this halacha of nizak and collecting from idis, which relates to this topic of nechasim b'shabadim, of encumbered properties. Learn a brisa. If someone sold his properties to one person, or 3 people as one, on the same day. So this guy is a person who is obligated to pay for damages. He owed a woman a ksuba, and he had creditors, and he also had these 3 categories of fields. He had idis, bainis, and ziburis. So the halacha is, if it was sold to one person or 3 people as one, meaning on the same day, all the buyers take the place of the seller. So whoever bought the idis field, he'll have to pay up. Because again, these are encumbered properties. In the Chasam Mishbab, there's a shiva, there's a lien on these properties. He's got to pay up. And whoever is in real estate knows this. When there's a lien, you take that responsibility. There's a lien on this property. So who has which lien? If you bought the idis fields, you got to pay up to the nizik. If you bought the bainis field, you got to pay up to that. If you bought the ziburis field, you got to pay up to the woman's ksuba. They all take the place of the owner. Now, however, here it gets more complicated. Let's say it's bezach or zeh. Let's say they didn't all buy on the same day. It was on different days. Then kulan gavim min achad. Everyone is going to collect from the last one. Meaning, even if the first ones bought idis and bainis, they could reject. Let's say these lukuchas, these buyers could reject. Let's say nizak and the balchayev, who are supposed to collect from idis and bainis, to the ziburis, because they could say the following svara: Hinachti lach makam ligves mimenu. I left you place where to collect from the one who owes you the money. Which the Mishnah Masechet is getting enough Memchezim base teaches you cannot collect from the Chasam Mishabadim.
What's the difference? So one field?
No. But the guy has a bunch of fields. He has a bunch of different categories of fields. He has 100 fields. Okay. But he has categories of idis, bainis, ziburis, and he sold it off. He's liquidating his assets. Okay. He sells it to 3 different enterprises. What?
He sells the same thing to them?
No. Idis, bainis, and ziburis. Okay. One party bought the best. One party bought the bida. I mean, it could be a combination, but just to simplify it. So the thing is, you cannot collect from the Chasam Mishabadim when there's B'nei Chayrin, even if what they left over by the debtor was Ziburis. So when these first 2 people bought and they left over Ziburis that were still available by the debtor, even though it was subsequently sold, whoever's coming to collect has to go to the last party who bought. Now, Ein Loi, let's say there's not enough for the 3 collectors from that property that was bought last. So then Goiva, then the collection is from Mishlafanav, the one who bought before the last guy. Ein Loi, if there's not enough to collect from the second to the last guy, Goiva Mishlafanav, you collect from the guy from before the last guy.
Why did we say before, kind of being applied to the other category? Why did we say over there?
There was talking about when you had a borrower and there was idis, bainis, and ziburis, and a guy went and sold off his idis. There was already a shibur on the bainis for the creditor, because the creditor collects from a loan from bainis. Here we're saying when there's a lien on this guy's property, so the guy who buys from that guy who's the debtor, he doesn't take the lien. Even though it's the idis, which you're right, and we're going to see this on Ahmed Beis as a discussion, but what the Gemara is assuming is that when you buy from that debtor, the creditors cannot come collecting from you, even though if it was by the owner, they would have collected that, but there's halacha, the Gemara says in Gittin, that you cannot collect from the Chasim Mishabadim, which is sold off properties that there's a lien on, when there's still available assets to collect. The guy has cash in the bank. You're coming to collect from me? A lien is only if the guy has nothing to pay.
That the Nezek had, in this case, the lien that the Nezek had on the moves over to the Zibur now?
Yes, simply because that's what's available by the debtor.
Why didn't it happen?
Because that's all the debtor. Here we're talking about there's another step of it. There's a buyer, what we call lekuches.
But they also sold it.
Right, so that's why you're not collecting from that. That macher that was sold of no one's you're not going to collect from that guy. That was just to qualify what's baininess in contrast to his idus.
His own baininess doesn't jump to become hideous.
That was the main part of that Gemara. No one was talking about collecting from that one that was sold off to. Here we're entering a new domain. There's a new guy involved, the guy who bought from the debtor. That guy cannot be collected from when there's still available assets by the debtor. And therefore, you collect from the last guy who bought because that was the first thing to be collected from. Not enough to collect, you go to the guy before. Not enough to collect from the guy before. Now, says the Gemara like this. That's the Bryces. And the Gemara is going to try to explain this. So you told me that if you sell it to one guy, so it has the halacha that he takes the place of the owner. Hey, what's the case talking about? As the Gemara explains. If it's at one time, meaning in one document, he took all his assets. This one company swallowed him up. He took all his properties. So I understand, what's the point of that case? If you tell me when there's three people. Remember, you could say, one of them was earlier, because one guy bought in the morning at 8 a.m., and the other two bought at 5 p.m., and technically he could say, no, you can't collect from me because I left your place. I bought at 8 a.m. and these two guys, these cronies bought at 5 p.m. Wait, technically you could say that, but you just don't say that, like Tess explains, because we don't write the hours of the document only in Yerushalayim. And still, Amrit Kula, you say they all take the place of the owner because it's not recognizable in the document of the sale. Who bought first? So everyone just takes the place of the owner. The one who has the Idris has to pay the Nizak, and the medium has to pay Machlev, and so on. So if one guy bought all on the same day, of course he's taking the place of the owner. What would be the chiddush? Elo no, pshit b'zachazeh. Obviously, the one guy case, when one guy bought it all, is even if it was on consecutive days. So then the question is, so if that's the case, why is it any different when there's three people? That every person could say, hey, well, I left you with a collect. You can't collect from me. I bought it on an earlier day. So you can't collect from me, even if I made this and you're Nezikin or whatever, this and that. So Hainami, so by the one guy also I don't understand. Akol chad v'chad, on every single one, lay malay, let the one buyer say, I left you a place where to collect from. So that they also all go to the zibuvas that he bought last. Why are you saying when there was one buyer, which the Gemara is saying obviously must be talking about Bazak Hazek, because Bazak wouldn't be a chiddush. Why are you saying that he takes the place and everyone can collect? No, but take from the last thing that I bought. Says Gemara, interesting answer. What are we talking about over here? Very lumdish Gemara discussion that the last thing he bought was the highest quality. He would prefer that he pays up like the halacha and not that they all go to the last one. Because if they're going to go to the last one, the last thing he bought was the highest quality, and they're going to wipe him out of the highest quality. Rav Sheish says, okay, you're right. It's like we taught, he bought the Idis last. So Gemara says, I don't understand. If that's the case, let them very happily come and collect from the last thing he bought. In other words, that if the last thing he bought from the Bas Chayrin, from the available ones, was Idis by the last two, after the last two purchases, so that's where the Shibud is on. So how could he say, no, you're a Bachayv, you get Bainis, you're a Ksubzit, you get Ziburis? What do you mean? No. Let's go collect from the last thing you bought, because that was available. And so why could he shift them actually? Says the Gemara, very interesting answer the Gemara says. He could tell them, and Tais discusses it's a lumdis, is it a taina, is it a halacha? So he could tell them, Ishat kisu, if you guys are going to be quiet, and you'll take according to your halacha, shaklisu, then take. If not, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to play hardball with you. Mahadrana shtada de ziburis lamari. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to give back the document of the ziburis back to the debtor, so that you have what to collect from, because you cannot collect from the chas mishal ones b'nei chayrin. And you're all gonna have to collect from ziburis. So either you guys behave and take according. What?
Who says he can do that?
Why not?
Who says he can go back on a sale?
Well, Tosh discusses, could he hide the star, whatever. He could do that. He could give it back. Now you have what to collect from. You have what to collect from. Your debtor has money now. He has ziburis. Go ahead, go collect from ziburis. Right? So don't play hard, like you want to play, you know what I'm saying? So if everyone wants to be nice, you'll collect idis, you'll collect bein ziburis. But that's what we're talking about, because the last thing he bought was idis. So therefore, that's why he doesn't want them to collect from the last thing. So Gemara says, wait a second, if that's the reasoning of this halacha, as it's come at Beis,
Takes the car, sells it, and gives them money.
so who takes what?
You owe it, whatever you owe, whether it's for whatever it is.
The debtor?
The debtor.
Not the leker, the debtor.
He owes money.
Right.
So they turn it from the concourse.
It says enli.
Can he sell the car?
He doesn't have karka. He sold it off, and now he has nothing.
No, but if they're looking to take from the idis, forget that we say that they could choose what they could take. He could sell the car he does have.
Who could? I'm saying the keys that we're discussing now. We're saying in general
General.
that when a guy has property.
Have property, and every given them idis, but I could.
Usually the halacha is when the guy wants to pay a property, then the idis bein zibus goes according to Nizak and B'chayiv, and the guy himself he could sell his property. Yeah. He could do that. But it's not so easy to sell.
Okay.
So that's what I'm saying. That's
He has a value.
yeah. I'm just saying. But when you're giving karka, that's the basic understanding. What type of karka could he collect? So the Gemara has a question like this. So if it's the way you just described, but nizaka namine mahachi, an interesting question the Gemara has. The guy who's collecting damages, why can't you tell him, hey buddy, if you want to collect bainness, collect bainness. If not, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to give back the shtar ziburis to your debtor, and you're going to have to collect ziburis. So the Gemara is asking, why is he giving the Nizakan guy kedine of idis? As Rashi explains a little bit further, he says the reason why we're asking from the Zakan and not from Baal Chayiv is because what claim could he say to Baal Chayiv? Hey, buddy, if you take ziburis, fine. If not, I'm going to give the shtar back to the master, and you're going to have to collect from him. And he says, go ahead, return it. Anyways, you want to give me ziburis. But the question is valid on the Nizakin. Why is this guy giving away free money? He has a good time. He says, come, let's meet some in the middle. You take bainness. Bainness, I'm a Nizakin, I'm a victim. How could you do this to victims? So look, I'm willing to give you bainness, because if you're not willing to take bainness, I'm going to give it back. You're going to collect from ziburis. So if you tell me the guy has a claim, or ishaskisu, you quiet shaklisi, go behave, I'll give you something nice, bainness. But if not, I'll give it back, you get ziburis. So I understand by Bachayb, he's going to get he can make this claim. And in other words, the claim won't be helpful, because go ahead, return it. Yeah, it is a claim, but the guy's like, go ahead, do something to me. So give it back. So fine, you anyways want to intimidate me, blackmail me into zibur, it doesn't make a difference. But it's a good taina regarding the idis. Why is he giving the nizak and the idis if you have such a claim? So the Gemara says, so Ella rather, from the fact that obviously the Bryce is not saying such a claim for the lekeach, obviously, we must be talking about where the meicher died. And since he didn't leave over properties, biyasmi, we're talking about orphans, the la b'nei pira ninu, which, yeah, exactly. And why can't you give it back? Because you cannot collect from orphans, because whatever movable items the orphans have is not meshubit to the creditor. Now, even though the guy's going to give him back property, so Rashi explains, it's like orphans that bought property after the father died, which would not be valid to collect from them. And the shibud delay allowed the derami, so the shibud would still remain on this lekeach. So you can't make such a claim. So now that takes it back to the question. We fall off what we said. You can't say Shakisov Shaklichu, because or else I'm going to give it back. There's no one to give it back. The guy's dead. Because if he was alive, then you should have said Nizakut should not get from Idis, you should get from Bainis. So we have to come up with another approach. Ella rather says the Gemara, the reason why, if you're telling me the last thing he bought was Idis, that the reason why they're not going to collect from Idis is Misham Damlu, because he tells them, Time my Amar Rabbanan, why did the rabbi say, you cannot collect from incumbent properties, when there's available ones? That was a takana for me, the lekeach, that we shouldn't get stuck. We want commerce to go on. No one's going to want to buy anything because the guy has outstanding debt. And they said, oh, great, there's a lien. I like that property this guy bought at 47th Street. Go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and, collect it from him. No, but the guy has money. So it was for me the takana. I don't want this takanta. I want you to take according to your halacha not to get the last thing. Because obviously if they take from the last thing, he wipes out his idis. Kedei Rava like Rava, because Rava said, in Mesefta Ksubis, Kol Oimer I Afshi. Whoever says, I don't want what the Chamor Besakin for me, could go and do like this case. Shemala, we listen to him. Says, Mike could go and do. What was the case that Rava was talking about? That was using that as an example to show that you could say, I don't want it, and we don't enforce it. It's because Ravuna. The Ravuna says, a woman can tell her husband, don't feed me supper. And you know what? When I work, that goes to my bank account. Because the whole takana was for me. Because maybe a woman's going to be working, she's not going to make enough for her own parnasa. So the Rabbanan were masakin for me, that you know what? You, my husband, you'll have to feed me. And then whatever earnings I get, go to you. She says, I'm an entrepreneur. I don't need you. You don't make anything. I make 4 times the amount that you make. And do me a favor, I don't need your money. Keep yours in your bank account, I'll keep mine. And she could say that because it was a hard takana. And she could say, I don't want the takana. So here also, this loikeach could say, I don't want the takana of this halacha of not collecting from bnei of nechas mishpah when it's bnei chayrin. Do me a favor, you will collect from those. And therefore, everyone will be kadine, which is it's supposed to be, and not like the takana that to collect from the last one. Because again, he doesn't want it in this case because that was the idis. Now the Gemara says, Pshita, the Gemara says, okay, what's obvious is as follows. Mocher loikeach. Remember, we were talking about this case where this buyer bought this same case, that the buyer, the last thing he bought was the idis, was the highest quality. If he sells, this guy he bought out the whole stock of this guy who was going out of business, all his fields. And remember, the last thing he bought was idis. And now this buyer sells off beinis v'ziburis to some other party, and v'shayir idis lefanav. He holds on to the idis for himself. Okay, you have to follow the case. Leisa kulu beligvim idis. Every collector of the guy he bought from will collect from the idis that he has. Why? The last thing that he bought was idis. And the shibudim of everyone is on the idis.
Didn't we just ask him that he doesn't go after the last one?
Right, so that's the next line of the Gemara. Ubeinis v'ziburis les nukabe. He doesn't have any more beinis ziburis by him because he sold it off to someone else. The matzulemu that he could tell them, no, government beinis v'ziburis. Guys, I want you to collect from beinis ziburis. I don't want the ganaban. What do you mean? You don't have beinis ziburis anymore. So since that was the last thing you bought, and that's what the shibud is on, well, that's what you got to pay everyone. Now, avol, machri idis, but if he sells the best quality, which was the last thing he bought, he sells it to Levi. The shai beinis ziburis, he remains with beinis ziburis by himself. What's the halacha? What's the question? So Rashi explains: do all of them go to the second buyer because he took their shibud? But from the first buyer, they will not collect because he could say, yeah, I wanted takanta d'Rabbanan. And the idis that was a baschayrin by the first 2 purchases is what is yours, meaning
the first buyer left plenty of shibudim. There was plenty left. And then otherwise, you're going to stop commerce. A guy would never buy anything.
Wait, say it again. The first buyer bought everything.
Let's say you So if I'm your first buyer, you have plenty of stuff left over.
Right.
for
But this
anything.
but this first buyer bought out everything from this debtor, right? He
Everything.
bought out everything. The last thing he bought was idis, which
Oh,
was
he bought in different stages.
yeah, and the last thing he bought was idis. Now that idis he sold off to a different party. So the question is, what do you do now with the collectors who are coming to collect? They're knocking on your door. Says, guys, the last thing I bought, which was where your shiba was idis, I sold it off to a third party, to Levi. So what's the halacha? Where are they collecting from? So Sava Abaye thought to say, okay, Asakula Midis. This is what it is. This was the last available thing that was bought. That's what guys, you got to go where the money is at. He's holding the bag. Only Rava says no. I says, I'll tell you why you're wrong. What does the first buyer sell to the second buyer? All the rights that he has is what's sold in that sale. Now, he says the following svar. If they would have came to the first buyer, as Rashi explains, meaning if the idis would still be there by the first buyer, which is what he sold to the second buyer, he would be allowed to shift them to Bein Ziburis with the claim by saying, I don't want to come for the last thing to be collected. I want you guys to collect Kedine. And even though when he bought the Bein Ziburis from the original owner, the Idis was still the last available thing. And you're really not allowed to collect from a common property because when the still available one. But still, he would have told them this all in what he would have. The first guy would have said, I don't want this takana. And therefore they would have collected not from the last Idis, they would have collected from Ziburis, this Balchayv and this Ksubas Isha. The second buyer can also say, hey guys, go to the first buyer and Gavi Beinis V'Ziburis. I want you guys to collect Beinis V'Ziburis because the Chizav and Lekech Sheni, when the second buyer buys from the first buyer, he has in mind whatever rights the first guy has in this, Zavin is what he bought it for. And the first guy would have been able to shift them to Beinis V'Ziburis. The second buyer has that right also to do that, and therefore says Rabbi, no, they're not going to collect from the Idis, they're going to collect from the Beinis V'Ziburis from the first guy. Now, a related discussion. Amar Rava says the following halacha. He says, Reuben shemacha kol sadais l'Shimon. If Reuben sells all his fields to Shimon, now v'halach Shimon amacha sad achas Levi. Shimon goes and sells one of the fields to Levi. Now Rashi explains that field that he sold to Levi was the Beinis field, and Shimon did not remain with any Beinis fields by him, as the Gemara is going to shortly explain. Okay, Ubaba did Reuven. Reuven, the original owner, has a creditor. Now Shimon bought all the fields. He's seemingly going to Shimon. But where did the Balchayv collect from? From Beinis. Shimon sold the Beinis to Levi. So where does Reuven's creditor collect from? Says Rava, if he wants, he could collect from Levi that field, which is the Beinis, because he could say, hey, my Shibud is the one that you took, which some Gemaras have on the side, that Rashi on the Rif and in the Ksav Yad adds on. This is not similar to the case we mentioned before where Rava said, what does the first guy sell to the second guy? That the second guy could push him back to the first buyer. No, over there he could tell them, I didn't take your halacha. Because if the idis would be by the first buyer, he wouldn't have given you from that. But here, the halacha of Al-Chayv is what Levi bought. Because if it would have been by Shimon, he would have collected that from Shimon. So he could collect that from Levi. Or if actually the creditor wants to collect from Shimon the Ziburis, because he could tell him, you're my party, you're my litigant, because you took over the Chasim of Reuven. You're the guy I'm coming to collect from. Which, anyways, Taisa says in general, the creditor has a choice not only by Chayv, of also collecting Ziburis. And you have my Ziburis, and then I'm going to collect from you. But, says the Gemara, we didn't say this, that this creditor of Reuven could collect from Levi. El de Zavin, only if Levi bought Beinis, which we really qualified from Rashi. But if Levi would have bought the Idis of Ziburis, then loy, the creditor cannot collect from Levi. Because the Amalei, Levi could tell that creditor of Reuven, Lahachi Daiki, that's why I was precise. Zabni Idis Ziburis, and I bought only Idis Ziburis, which is Agad Lechazilach, land that's not fit for you. And therefore you cannot collect from me, because your Sheba is not on Idis and Ziburis. Now, Which even though really Zebus he could collect, the Taisa gets into detail regarding that. Now, now the truth is, even if Levi bought Bainis, we didn't say that Reuben's credit could collect from Levi El Shai Bainis the Kavasei, only if he didn't leave over equivalent Bainis by Shimon. Where he can't say I left you overplaced by Shimon. But if let's say Levi left over some bainis by Shimon, then Reuben's creditor cannot collect from Levi. Because the Matzah can tell him, hey, listen, I left you over room to collect from the first buyer, therefore you have no rights to come to me. Now, Abaya, another related halacha, Abaya says, Reuben shemacha sada l'Shimon b'achrayis. A guy, Reuben, sells his field with insurance to Shimon, saying if anything happens, you could collect from me, I'll compensate you. Now, Reuben's creditor now comes to collect from Shimon. So on that says Abaye, Dinuhu, the halacha is the Azal Reuben could go, who is the original owner, and he could litigate with this creditor to remove him from the field with claims, if Reuben has any claims on that collector to say, hey, I paid you up already. But the Gemara in Shavuos, Daf Memav tells us that even though someone's holding a star, if he says, swear to me I didn't pay you, he has to swear. Which Tais has a whole discussion. Tais says, seemingly there's no relevancy because where anyone's going to make those claims for Shimon. Tais says there is enough Kamina regarding a few different areas. But be that as it may, the Gemara is saying, yes, he could go to court with him. And the creditor of Reuben cannot tell to Reuben, hey, you're not a litigant with me in this property. It's not in your name anymore. I want to take my shiba, which is by Shimon. No, because the Amalei, obviously Reuben can tell him, whatever you're going to collect from Shimon, alai hadar, it's coming back on me because I took insurance. He has insurance out on me, so of course I'm party to this court case. Now that's one version. Some say even more. Abayis halacha was even if the seller did not give any insurance on the sale, still the Amalei could tell him, I don't want Shimon to have complaints against me. Oh, you sold me. Oh, you did me. Legally he has nothing against him, but he doesn't want him to have complaints. So even that's enough to say that I'm coming to court and I'm going to make claims also. Now, another teaching of Abaye says, Reuben sold the field to Shimon without insurance. As we continue to have Testament Alf, the Yatzala Asikin. And then there's contesting, people saying, oh, it's ours, and that there was no rights for Reuben to sell this field. So it depends. Actually, if the buyer did not yet do a chazaka, did not take possession of it, so he could back out of the deal. If he already made a chazaka, took possession, and then it's too late, then he cannot go ahead and back out. My time, what's the reason? And this is when he sold it to him without insurance, because the Amalek could tell him, look, chayis the katri, which a metaphor, a tied sack full of ear, Savit, you thought, but Kabbalta, you accepted. I mean, you didn't know what you were getting into. You're willing to take it, and it's your fault. It's your tough luck. So when it's considered that he made a chazaka, is mechidayish ametzri, is when he went walking by the border, which the Gemara in the first paragraph of Metzia, David Alan Beis from Rashi explains that even though he didn't give any money, karka is acquired with chazaka. So the moment he went around the border and he took possession, it's already too late. Now, says the Gemara, this is only, as we said, if the sale was without insurance. So okay, you were willing to take it, no backsies, no tracksies, it's too late. But if it was with insurance, then no, he's not stuck with it. Because I'm insurance anyway, so I hear people already murmuring that this is not your fill. I want my money back, right? You let's say you want people say I want to return this. Now this will say no, I feel b'chrayis nami. No, even if the seller accepted responsibility, he could say, I mean, you would have thought to say that since he's going to have to take it back, I want you to take it back right now. No, he cannot back out. Why? Because the Amalei, the seller could tell him, show me that the courts wrote for you a document of collection that halachically the other guy really was the owner and he took it from you. And then I'll pay it to you. Until then, you can't back out. Even though I promised you insurance, let's see, something happens, and then I'll compensate you. Thank you anytime for those things.